All right. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're doing great. And I put a little note on the screen there for you at the beginning about reading a little bit in John 1 and John 2. If you've had a chance to do that, great. It is not necessary. It just be helpful for you. And we'll give everybody a few more minutes to jump in here. My clock says 5 o'clock, but let's see see who's here. I see Shirley Hicks is here. Glad to have you, Miss Shirley. And Gary Guthrie and Diane are here. And I assume that you all have a bunch of kids at your house. I sent all of the kids, Gary, from this morning's sermon over to your house. Gary and I were having a laugh after class about the story of Samuel and the Hannah taking Samuel to the temple for the rest of his life, and Gary and I both had the same thought independently. What would people do today? Would they just drop their kids off at the church and leave them? And I was kind of thinking to myself, no, let's don't do that. So anyway, glad you guys are here. And Janet and John Knox are here. Good deal. The Schaefers are here. McCarvers are here. The Kings are here. The Taylors are here. Burks are here. Good deal. We've got a nice little a nice little group here, and we're going to be. You may have noticed this on our Proclaim. We're going to be transitioning to the Gospel of John, and I'm going to drop the This is the Bible title and just go with the Gospel of John. We are in the Gospel of John with our readings right now, so I can't remember. I'm a couple of days behind. We had some graduation travel, and I'm just a couple of days behind, but I know we're in John, and we probably won't cover everything, but I'm going to point out a few things to us. But if you're following along in the daily readings, the Bible in 1 year, you're going to recognize some of this content from the Gospel of John. If not, I'm sure you've read John before. If not, it's a great opportunity to do it, and or do it again. So anyway, we'll be doing the Gospel of John, and for the next 5 or 6 weeks, I guess. I haven't decided, and this was kind of the intro slide that appeared on there. John 1, 1 through 18, and John 2, 1 through 11 were kind of the passages that we're going to focus on tonight. And so just be prepared for that, and I'm going to throw some questions up there in a little while. I know we've always got that delay in the video that makes it a little bit awkward, but anyway, I'm looking forward to this, and I may be able to put the questions out a little bit early on Facebook, and I may try to do that. I think that might be helpful for our discussions. And I do want to point this out. I want to give credit to where credit is due, but this is the Bible study, Life Lessons from John, and I'm not using the content as much as I'm using the discussion questions. But I did want to give credit to Max Licato and Life Lessons from John. I'm using the discussion questions because I think they're really good, and I've got several commentaries and resources I've developed through the years. Gospel of John is one of my favorite books. So they all are my favorite. You know that, but I do love this book, and so anyway, let's go ahead and get started. It's 5:04. And hopefully you've had a chance to read a little bit if you wanted to do that ahead of time. So let's pray, and then we'll jump right in and get rolling. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the rain. We thank you that we were able to celebrate some of the ladies in our life today that are moms and grandmoms and moms to our children, and so on and so forth. Father, we're just blessed at Kingwood to have many special women, some that don't have biological children of their own, but who love our kids as their own. And Father, there's so many special women here at Kingwood. We're so thankful to be a part of a family like that. Tonight, as we begin our study of John and the Gospel of John, help us to learn about Jesus and help us to see what John is trying to say and to apply it to our lives. And Father, again, we just thank you for this day, for the rain we've had, and just continue to watch over us every moment of our lives. May we give you all the glory, and it's through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to jump right in to the Gospel of John as promised. So, and again, this will be our study for the next 5 to 6 weeks, and I'm glad you're here. So, the purpose of John had in writing this Gospel. And if you were with us last go-around, you saw that we studied Luke, and we talked about his purpose in the prologue, in the beginning verses, that he was going to set aside an orderly account for Theophilus and so forth. The Matthew and Mark Gospels are a little bit different in kind of fleshing out their purposes and so forth. But John has a very explicit statement, but it's not at the beginning of John, it's at the end of John. And so let's go ahead and identify that. It's John 20, 30, and 31. This is the next to the last chapter in John. And let me read this. And I've highlighted 3 words in here that I want you to pay attention to because I think it applies to what we're going to be talking about. It says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. We have a little bit of delay. I apologize. The rest of this verse says, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So there were 3 words. The first word was signs, and John says there were many signs that weren't written in this book, implying that there were signs written about in this book, but there were more that weren't written about, okay? So the purpose of the signs was that that you may what? These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And what's the consequence or the result of believing? That you can have life. Life in his name. So John is writing this gospel so that he's sharing the signs. And remember, he was an eyewitness and one of the inner circle of Jesus. Peter, James, and John. And he lived. He was not martyred. And so he had a lot of time to grow and reflect. He was probably one of the youngest disciples. But, neither here nor there, he had a lot of time to watch the early church grow and reflect back. And then he writes this gospel, including signs of Jesus. Another word for signs would be miracles. Okay, the difference is a miracle. Sometimes we think about a miracle and we just think, oh, that's an incredible act. Well, a sign does what? A sign might be more like a miracle, but it's pointing to something, right? Where's the restroom when you go in a restaurant? If you're driving on the interstate, a sign points, this is the exit, or this is the restaurant you want to stop at, or this is when the split comes, I'm going to take this one or this one. So it's an event, it's a miracle that is pointing to something. All miracles are signs, right? John wants these specific ones to point to Jesus. I'll show you something about that here in just a minute, but the signs point to Jesus so that we'll believe, the readers will believe in him, and if we believe, we can have life, eternal life, life now, abundant life. And so that's John's purpose. And so I think it's important to point that out as we look at the Gospel of John, what's going on. So let's look at a brief outline. And this is so brief, but it's really kind of simple, and I've kind of divided it up a little bit more than even it could be. There's the beginning of John, which is the prologue, and we'll talk about that tonight. And then there is from chapter 1, verse 19 to chapter 12, verse 50, the end of chapter 12, there are 7 signs, 7 miracles, and they point to who Jesus is and his power over things and so forth. And then there's a distinct turn in chapter 13, and it going to the end of the gospel, and it's often called the Book of Glory. These are not my terms. These are terms that have come over the years, that the first is the Book of Signs, and the second half is the Book of Glory. And so we'll try to pay special attention to these things, but I want us to jump in tonight, and we're going to talk about the prologue and the first of the 7 signs, and the content is only in John, this first sign. You'll recognize it, and again, I apologize. When I click my screen, my PowerPoint or presentation, it's just delaying a little bit, so I'm going to have to get a little bit quicker on the draw here. But let's read John 1, 1 through, it says 14, but I believe I have 18 there. So, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. There are those words again, believe particularly. So he himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. All right, so again, I apologize for any delay there on my reading. It's not syncing greatly, but this first section in John is well known, and there's so much to point out. You know, in the beginning, John echoes the Genesis 1:1 passage, was the Word was with God, the Word was God, he was with God in the beginning, so on and so forth. He was light and life, and so it's a very different beginning, isn't it, than Matthew, Mark, or Luke. John is different. We see that right off the bat. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic Gospels, they are similar. John is different. There's a lot of material, and the way John writes and his style of writing is much different. So let's look at some questions here that I think might be helpful, and I would love to have some feedback in the chat box tonight. I really wished we were in person to discuss this. But why do you think John begins his gospel by stating Jesus was with God in the beginning at creation? What would possibly be his purpose? And go ahead there and read those next questions. What surprises you about Jesus coming to earth as a human being? How does that comfort or encourage us? And what does this passage say about Jesus' mission? So I wonder what your answers might be for any of those. Why do you think John starts this way? I mean, again, we've pointed out that this is very different than what Matthew starts out with, a genealogy. Luke starts out, we just talked about this, with his purpose. He's going to write an orderly account for Theophilus. Mark kind of jumps right in and begins with the baptism of Jesus, and we're going to see that here shortly in John. We won't see it, but if you were to read, you'll see that that's kind of the next thing. Luke and Matthew start with birth narratives. What's going on with this? Why do you think John does this? What's he trying to establish by saying Jesus was with God in the beginning? I don't know. I know there's going to be a delay in our comments here. Let me see if I can throw out a thought or two about this. Why did John do this? Well, there's some speculation that, just as in all the Gospels, about who Jesus is. There's some confusion amongst people. There's some confusion amongst early Christians even about who Jesus really was. And I think John is trying to establish right off the bat that Jesus is divine. He was with God. He was there at creation. He is God. He is going to highlight this at the very beginning. The other Gospels have this approach of proving who Jesus was from prophecy, from genealogy. John just comes out with it. Boom. He's going to tell you as the reader, behind the scenes, this is what's going on. Jesus came from God. He is God. And he is light, and he comes into the world. And Shannon points this out to make a point that they are one. That's right. He's identifying who Jesus is right off the bat. And so in him was life. Life was the light of men. The light is shining in the darkness, etc. All things were made through him. What does Mindy say here? Let's see if we can get some more feedback here. I'm going to have to change my screen so that we can actually see what you're saying. Maybe to establish so we can, quote unquote, know Jesus is the Christ, as he states in the end while this was written. Yeah, exactly. John is letting us as readers in on the secret. Jesus is God's Son. He is the Messiah. And if we believe in him, we can have life. And he's going to share these signs. And so, he kind of says right up front, this is who Jesus is. And Dorothy Fox says, I believe that what is to will, Jesus is everything. Yeah. Good points, guys. I really appreciate that. So let's see what else might be going on here. So kind of reflect on this with me. What is it that surprises you or me about Jesus coming to earth as a human being? Is that a comfort or an encouragement? And we'll reflect on his mission here in just a minute. Yeah, I mean, out of all the ways God could have chosen to save us, he chooses to come back into his creation as a human and do it the right way. That Jesus be our sacrifice, our example, our model, our comfort. I mean, does it encourage you that he chose to pursue us in a rescue mission in this way? Absolutely. I'm a fan of Marvel comic movies. I think you may have heard me talk about this once before in a Sunday morning class with Jeff a month or two ago. But sometimes when you pit the Earthlings against these mighty extraterrestrial beings. You see these, how small we really are, and we need the Avengers, to save us, and these supernatural beings. And so, anyway, to me, it's interesting. God could have appeared to us in any form. He could have appeared to us in any form that He chose, but He chose to become. He humbled Himself as a man, Philippians says. He came to draw us to Himself. And it's interesting because I think that is an encouragement. He came along beside us. He came as one who was tempted in every way as we are. And there's something about that brings encouragement to us. Dorothy Fox, it's an encouragement, I believe, is what she's trying to say here. Yeah, it is an encouragement, and I love that about the fact that God put flesh on, right, and came to earth to save us, to touch us, to heal us, to love us, to provide for us. And we're going to see that in so many ways. So what is His mission? That was the last question on this page. What does this passage say about Jesus' mission? His mission, the light shines in the darkness hasn't understood it. He came to that which was His own. He made His dwelling among us. There's all of these passages. Light, right? John picks up the theme of light and the light shining in the darkness. You ever been in a dark place? I was in a hallway at my in-laws the other night, and I was in I had gotten up to go to the restroom and flipped the light on the bathroom off, and I couldn't, I wasn't in a familiar, it's been a little while since we've been there because of COVID, and I was like, okay, I'm in the hallway, and I've been in this hallway before, but my eyes hadn't adjusted to the darkness. I couldn't see where I was. They had not adjusted to that little bit of light that's in the hallway, right? And so I was like, okay, where am I? And it was like dark for a minute. And I've thought about that, It sure would have been nice to have had a light to see where I was going, or to make sure I didn't bump into something or whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, here's Jesus saying in verse 4 and 5, in Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness hasn't understood or overcome it. We live in a dark world, a world that needs light. And it needed to be shown the way, and God said, okay, I'm going to send the light. And Jesus says later in John, I'm the light of the world. So Shannon throws out there, good, to save souls. To save us, that's right. So Jesus' mission is clearly illustrated. Let's look at a few more questions about this section. What is John the Baptist's purpose? Well, John comes in verse 6 as a witness, right, to testify. And John points out in verse 8, he himself, talking about John the Baptist, was not the light. He is a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world, right? So why did John, the writer of this gospel, who is not John the Baptist, by the way, two different Johns, why did he go to the trouble, if you will, of pointing out John the Baptist was not the light of the world, but was a witness to that light? Well, there were many early followers of John the Baptist and of Christ who were a little confused about John the Baptist's role and elevated John the Baptist much higher. And John the Baptist would have not liked that. He was very clear, my role was to decrease, his role is to increase. And so here we have that clarification. Shannon Johnson said to introduce Christ. That's right. He was the forerunner, the preparing the way. Melody McCarver says, light penetrates darkness, but if a light is present, darkness cannot put it out. That's right. Even the smallest light, right? So we've got this purpose of John the Baptist. It's not the same as Jesus. And so anyway, let's look at a couple more questions here, and then we'll go on. Many people did not recognize Jesus as the Messiah or believe he was God's son. What did they miss out on? Well, it appears to me that the answer to this question is in verse 12. Yet to all who received him, to all who believed in his name, he gave the right to become, what's it say? Children of God. So if they or us don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah sent from God, the one that was promised, or we don't believe that, we miss out on becoming his children. That's definitely a big loss, right? To miss out on that. So what does Jesus' life as a man tell us about God as a father? So, and that's kind of, I think, referring to the end of this section here. I love verse 16. I just kind of was reminded of that today reading this. From the fullness of his grace, we've all received one blessing after another. And then specifically, the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only. Okay, who is God, the one and only? Well, God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known. The one and only Son, which is referred to in John 3:16 as well. So if we haven't seen God, we actually have, because we've seen Jesus. So what does Jesus' life as a man tell us about God as a father? Well, we're going to see as Jesus lives out his life, God in the flesh. What would God do if he was among us? Well, it's not what if, it's what does he do when he's among us, because he does come among us as Jesus, the one and only Son. And so we're going to learn a lot about who God is, because he is among us in the form of a man as Jesus. So it's I love this intro, this prologue of John. And Jesus is very clear. No one has ever seen God but Jesus. Jesus is the only one, and we're gonna see this. So Mindy points out everything. He says repeatedly, you cannot know the Father except by me. That's right. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So we're going to see a lot in John's Gospel, and I'll try to point out a little bit here and there, but I encourage you, go back and read through this prologue. Go back and look at John 20, 30, and 31. Let's see why another gospel? What's John trying to do? He's trying to point out the life and the privileges we can have as children of God. And so he begins his story there. And so let's look at this first sign. And again, it is only found in the Gospel of John. John 2, 1 through 11. It's a wedding. The wedding at Cana. And I'm going to ask you a few questions here in a minute. And one of them is going to be, what do you think Jesus is? Is that strange that Jesus goes to a wedding? Does that surprise you that he was kind of at this wedding? And it says he was invited. We're going to see that. So let's go ahead and read John 2, 1 through 11. And again, I've got a little bit of a delay here. Maybe I should, I'll try my best to anticipate a little better. But it says, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Remember, Jesus was a Galilean. Jesus' mother was there. Jesus, his disciples, had also been invited to the wedding. So when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. I want us to come back to that phrase, my hour has not yet come. What does Jesus mean by that? We'll talk about that in a minute. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. So Mary has this reaction to Jesus' reluctance, and I'm curious your thoughts about that. What it is that Jesus, what it is that Mary, how she reacts to that. So we'll come back to that as well as one of our questions. What is her reaction, and then Jesus takes action, right? Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. And they did so. Looks like my reading may be stuck. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine, and he didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who'd drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best till now. So what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. And his disciples believed in him. Well, we have these this very unusual miracle. It's not a healing. It's not a demon exorcism. It is an appearance at a wedding. There's no lame walking, blind seeing here. There's no healing of blood. There's no. Those things are coming. But this first sign that John points out was at a wedding. So I'm curious, does it seem unusual Jesus would attend a wedding, just first and foremost? Why or why not? Does that seem unusual to you? And I think Dorothy's saying yes. I think that may have been from another question. Dorothy says she loves it. She loves that Jesus would attend a wedding, or why he would. Maybe it was because of love. I'm going to say that, it seems to me that this is a great thing that John includes, and it would be sad, not sad. It would be a loss for us to not have known that Jesus went to weddings. Now did his disciples and Jesus were invited? Was it someone they knew? It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. It seems possible. Maybe that's a better way to say it. That Jesus' mother had some role in this wedding. Okay, was it someone from their community? Was it family? Or at a minimum, she knew something about Jesus that he was going to take care of the problem. Okay, now did that mean Jesus was going to run to the store and get wine? Did that mean that? We don't know. But for her to take some leadership role in trying to fix this problem indicates something, okay? Because heretofore, nothing has happened publicly, because we know Jesus says, "My time's not yet come." And, it's interesting that is going on. What did Jesus mean when he said that? My hour has not yet come. It's not time for me to what? Glorify myself, to reveal myself, to indicate who I am, that I'm just here at this wedding in Cana of where? Of Galilee. Remember, he had gone up to the northern part of Israel. Luke has lots of his ministry up there, and in Nazareth and Capernaum and all of these things. And so he's up there in Cana at this wedding. Maybe it was family, maybe it wasn't, but it's not his time. What does Jesus mean by that? Well, this wasn't his original plan to reveal himself. Nevertheless, he does, right? So what is Jesus' response? And what did Mary respond? How did Mary respond to Jesus' reluctance when he said this? Why did Jesus go ahead and do this? What were the 6 water jars? What's the whole deal about that particular detail that John includes? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as I kind of prattle on here. I do think there's significance in the 6 water jars. And, it's interesting. John includes this detail. Why did John do that? John has a habit, a style, a pattern of including details and using symbols. He's already alluded in the intro about light and dark. Light and dark. And now he's in life, right? He's going to talk about a little bit further some things. So what were these water jars used for? Well, they were the kind of water jars, according to verse 6, chapter 2, used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. So the readers of this that were Jewish would have known what kind of jars these were. And those that weren't, John explains, this is part of the ritual and ceremonial washing. Ceremonial washing. To make clean, to make pure. And Jesus says, okay, I'll take care of it. It's not my time, but I'm going to do it. You can sense the interplay there between son and mom. Interesting on this Mother's Day, right? We've all kind of been there. When our moms ask us to do something, we do it. And so he honored his mom by taking care of this. He didn't make a big to-do about it. He didn't broadcast, I'm now going to turn water to wine. Okay? Wine takes time, right? It is the fermentation of the grape over time. And they would have had table wine. Would not have had strong alcoholic content. But still it would have taken a little while to ferment. This was being served, and the at the end, just for reference, the master of the banquet, the one who was presiding over everything, and again, this would have been a multi-day feast and community celebration for this young couple. It would have been the responsibility of the families to provide this, and it would have been an embarrassment to have run out of wine or food or anything as this was going on. And so here's Jesus saving the day, saving the embarrassment, the cultural embarrassment, social embarrassment. And he uses these 6 jars. Was it because they were large enough to hold enough water? Was that what was going on? He wanted to make sure they had plenty. John points out maybe a symbolic thing, that the way Jesus used these jars was going to be more life-giving than what the actual purpose of those jars was. The ceremonial, the outward cleaning. Jesus was going to bring life. He was going to turn water into wine at this wedding, and he was going to change the content from water to wine. He was going to have to this quality. Now, why 6? What's the significance of 6? Stone, dead stone jars, right? Well, 7 was the number of complete and life and the perfect number. So 6 would have been the imperfect. So it's interesting how John uses this story, the symbolism of 6 as being incomplete, of the stone being, dead, so to speak, not living, and water for purification, ceremonial cleansing, now becomes a living celebration kind of material here. And so I don't think that there's any doubt that there was some significant symbolism meant by Jesus picking these jars. Maybe it was just what was around, but John includes this detail to indicate, again, Jesus is what? The source of life. And the banquet master says, man, you did it backwards. Most people bring out the good stuff first. Everybody is a little bit filled, with alcohol. They're a little bit inebriated maybe. And then they bring out the bad stuff that just, let's just keep the party going. You guys did it bad. So what Jesus provided wasn't just, the bare minimum. It was quality. It was better than anything else that was offered. And so it's interesting. I'm not really interested in getting into whether Jesus drank this or whether this is an endorsement of social drinking or anything like that, like I hear people say from time to time, as much as I am you understanding and me understanding that Jesus was a master of quality. And here he is. He's going to be providing something going forward in his ministry to the world, the light that's come into the world, the life that's come into the world. He is providing something that is going to be of much more quality than the ritualistic cleaning, ceremonial cleaning of the Jews. He is coming into the world to bring life, right? So I think there is some significance in his using these 6 water jars that were used for ceremonial cleaning. Again, Mary responds to Jesus' reluctance by saying, what? Just do what he tells you. So you have trust that he was going to, he was going to help her, right? And Jesus went ahead and performed this, I think, probably because he loved his mom, and, he didn't really want to get involved. That wasn't his plan, but he was God, and so he was able to use this, and it was very low key. It says only the servants knew, right, who had done this, where this wine had come from. This wasn't a big showboating kind of thing, but John knew. He was one of the disciples, and he used this as the first sign as they began to put their trust in Jesus. You don't turn water into wine. That is not the way the process goes. Grape juice is what becomes wine, right? As it ferments over time, but Jesus was able to do this miraculously as they poured it. So what can we learn from the way Mary brought her problem to God? And I will kind of close with that. What can we learn about that? She entrusted herself entrusted this problem to Jesus, right? It seems like she didn't really worry about it. She knew where to take the problem. She knew she didn't know necessarily how he was going to fix it, but she knew he would. And she said, do whatever he says, right? So maybe the lesson for us, at least from this first sign, is that when we have a difficulty in life or a problem, that we need to just take it to Jesus, knowing that it's going to be better. It's going to be better. So, all right. I don't want to oversimplify that. I don't want to dismiss any other issues that might have come up necessarily, but as John paints this picture of Jesus as the life and the light of men, we see this wonderful first sign that points to that here in the Gospel of John. So I can encourage you to continue to read some in John 3, 4, 5, 6, some of the other signs. I want you to see if you can figure out what the next signs are. We'll cover at least two of them, maybe three of them next week. And again, there are 7. Is that by accident that there's 7? I think, again, John's symbolism, light and dark, the cold stone religious cleaning jars now giving life and celebration to the bride and the bridegroom and their family. I think that's what John is trying to show, and to show us that Jesus is life. So anyway, God bless you guys. I hope you have a great evening, and we will see you next week. I may be pre-recorded next week because of some other commitments I've got going, but we will definitely continue in the Gospel of John. Again, seek Him. Look for Him this week to be your light and your life. God bless.